All right, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to turn my camera off so you don't have to look at me the rest of the day. And we're going to turn it over to Kimberly. I want to just give a little bit of quick background. First of all, welcome. We're glad you're here. For those that didn't hear the announcement, go ahead and drop into the little chat window there. Put your name and where you're from so we can say hi. If you're having any problems with the webinar, if audio or video becomes a problem, then usually reloading the window is the best thing to do. And that should solve most problems. And then if you have questions, you can type those in the chat window as well. And we'll be looking for those questions throughout the presentation today. Now, for some background, Kimberly, we were talking about our next webinar. It must have been, I don't know, almost a month ago. And no, less than that, but we were talking about it and we were brainstorming some ideas for what we should speak on next. And then Kimberly, I don't know, out of the blue, she gets this look on her face and she gets all excited and says, hey, I've got this new stuff that I've been doing and I've got these graphs and they're getting green. You won't believe this stuff, Adrian. I'm like, really? And so I said, that sounds like a webinar to me. And so then she comes out with this title about patients are getting better faster. So like all of you, I'm really excited to see what she has to say. I'm going to quit taking up her time and let her get started and tell us what's going on. So without further ado, here is Kimberly Thompson.
Hello. I am going to quickly bring up my presentation here. And
it's up.
It's up. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay, so in our webinar, we are going to talk about how patients are getting better faster. And I have a little bit of extra information that I want to talk about really quick. So I sent out an email, and in the email, I sent out a blog post, and it's called Then versus Now. And if any of you have ever been to any of my webinars, when I get excited about something, I could go on and on and on, and an hour isn't enough to teach it all. So I wrote a pre-webinar information in the blog post. So if you're watching today, I'm assuming you probably have already read the blog because we sent that information out, but I'm just giving information because there will be those who watch this webinar later when they are newer to AcuGraph. And I want to be sure that if you are getting ready to watch this blog, that you have read the blog post Then versus Now. A lot of information is in there, and it really gives progress of what I have taught in the last 7 years of working with AcuGraph. And there have been a lot of perspectives and a lot of thought processes along the way, and all of them are good and all of them work. And the important part is for you to recognize that what we're teaching today is more of an advanced theory, and it does not negate any of the other stuff. There are times to use the basics and there are times to use the advanced. So I just wanted to make that clear. And this is the picture that's in that blog post. So when you go to our website and you find it, that's what you'll be looking for. Let's see. I am guessing that if you are an AcuGraph owner in general, that you own AcuGraph because you want to advance. You want to advance with the way you educate your patients, the things that you see and recognize when you are talking to your patients. And I'm going to turn my face off real quick so you can see the whole screen. So you're either already an advanced practitioner if you're sitting here watching this today, or you are newer to AcuGraph and you want to become an advanced practitioner. So I have a few thoughts for you in your progression. If you're brand new to AcuGraph, if you go to your AcuGraph user resources, you log into your account, we give a ton of information. You can actually, right in your AcuGraph, you can click on the help button and then click on AcuGraph user resources, and it will get you into your account from there. But if you're new to AcuGraph, this is where we send you first, getting started, practice management, how to read graphs. These are all the typical questions we get from new AcuGraph users. But if you aren't new to AcuGraph, and have not seen this page, you really should go there, because over the last year, we have taken all of the information that we have shared over time. We've looked at frequently asked questions, and we've combined this into one place for your value. So regardless of where you are in your practice, whether it's marketing or learning how to analyze a graph, becoming an expert, this is where you'll go and find more information about that. If you are interested in TCM strategies, I just thought the direction that I would guide you would be the case studies book. Because you read the blog post that I talked about, there was at least a year or two that my focus was on recognizing TCM strategies within AcuGraph, and a lot of those can be found in the case studies book. And then also in the 2010 AcuGraph training of Module 9, that was my first teaching when I began teaching about TCM patterns and how I recognize them in AcuGraph. The next level of training, back in 2014, we did a training here in Idaho. If you are part of the enterprise plan, I believe, then you get this for free. It's available to you. There's 12 CEU credits. We go into Raidaraku style acupuncture, which is how AcuGraph is based. We go into expert graph analysis from multiple different perspectives and marketing. So that is all available to you. And then this last year, this was this year, we just finished up with our Acupuncture Technology Symposium. We did this back in Baltimore, and there were 20 CEU credits available. Dr. Larsen talked about technology and science. I went into all kinds of clinical experience on how I use AcuGraph with non-needle techniques and graph analyzing. We had Jake Fratkin, who was there, and he was teaching the Divergent treatments. And we had Deb Davies there teaching pregnancy. So I probably am going to ask Adrian to pop in here for just a moment. This is for those who are upgrading, which it is upgrade time. That is free for enterprise users. Can you give us an update on that, Adrian?
Yeah, on the Symposium for enterprise users. Yeah, it's all built out. It looks totally fabulous. We just got word that the CE credits are approved. And so we're adding the CE credits and the test taking ability so that you can complete the quiz, get your certificate, download it right online. That'll all be built out probably within the next week and go live. So looking forward to that. It's really looking good.
Okay. So having said that, I've given you some background on where you can gain more information in order to become more of an expert AcuGraph user. So the next level is what's new. I have been doing some cool, exciting new things in my clinic, and I am about to share that with you today. And here are just some tidbits of what's changed in my clinic. So graphs are changing faster. If you will take a look here, notice this first one here, July 26th, August 1st, August 3rd. That is really fast for a graph to be this dysfunctional, the way it was on August or July 26th and up until August 3rd to change this much. There are some new things that I'm doing, and this is not just an anomaly of just that one segment of graphs. I keep taking pictures like this. They're all over my desktop because I'm amazed. I'm excited. I'm amazed. And it's fascinating to me to see the graphs change this quickly. Here's an example back in 2010 when I would graph a patient on June 18th, June 24th, and July 22nd. Obviously, things weren't changing as much, and it didn't mean that I wasn't getting good results in my clinic. All I can say now is within 7 years' time, I am getting much better results, phenomenal results, and it has to do with some of the things that I'm going to teach you today. Another thing that I have recognized over time is, so this is a wellness patient of mine who comes in once a month, and I used to teach I used to teach practitioners that when your patients came in a month later, you can expect to see chaos in the graph. You're not going to be, these are my old words, you're not going to be able to take a graph from November and then have them come in December and see a tremendous amount of change. It's when you're treating patients closer together that you'll see change. But what I am recognizing now, based on some of the things that I'm doing, patients are coming in a month later and their graph is fairly well balanced, which is really exciting because the patients are noticing it. A lot of these wellness patients of mine have been around for years, so they're noticing that they're doing better. And I can't get up and claim anymore that, yeah, it's really rare that you'll see an all green graph. On occasion, and if they're just a really great athlete or those types of circumstances. And if you've watched any of our older webinars, those are things that we've said over the years, but I just do not find that that is true anymore. Graphs are changing faster. So the other thing that I'm recognizing is, you know how in time, as life changes, as you gain more experience, you get harder patients. The universe, you're just ready for harder patients. All of a sudden, I'm getting really hard patients. And when these patients come in, there are times when I sit down and do their intake and I gather all of their information, and I literally like question myself, is this a patient that is out of my league? Am I going to be able to help this patient? And what I'm recognizing is that the hard patients are coming in. They're obviously being attracted my way, but I am getting great results with them, results that I wouldn't have been able to get at an earlier time. And it's because I have some newer techniques, some newer tools, some newer strategies that I'm working with. So, so the other thing is this advanced treatment strategies. I'm just going to call it the Divergent box. So a little background in history. I go to the acupuncture shows and conventions and I teach people all about AcuGraph, and they say, oh, so how do you treat? And so I give them examples and I click on this little box down in the corner of your AcuGraph screen and I tell them the basic philosophies that, if a channel is excess, you sedate it. If a channel is deficient, you tonify it. I show them that they can use ear points. I show them that they can treat back shoe points, and they get all excited about it. And they say, what is that other little box? And I would click on it and show them. And I would say, those have to do with the divergent channels. And nobody really uses those, but they're part of AcuGraph, and it's one extra advanced way of treatment. And that's literally how I would make the explanation of that little box. So my disclaimer on that is ignorance. Ignorance is what I knew about the little box. I knew that divergent channels existed, and I knew that they were in AcuGraph. I knew that nobody ever uses them. And what's funny is here's a quote that Miki Shima said regarding divergent channels. He says, although channel divergences are intriguing, they tend to fade from most Western acupuncturist consciousness soon after being introduced. This is due to the fact that few Western acupuncturists have any idea of what to do with the channel divergences in actual clinical practice. So if you have followed me over time, if I don't know something about a certain treatment strategy or certain tool, my first inclination is to think, oh, it just doesn't work. But once I study it out and I gain some knowledge and actually try it, then I find out amazing things. For me, the key factor is studying it out, because I don't trust easily going, oh, well, so it says to treat all of these points. I guess I'll just treat them and see what happens. That's just not the way my mind treats. So my goal today in this webinar, as you're looking at this little box and the black arrows known as the divergent box, I want you to I want to give you enough knowledge that you can go in and understand what's in the box so that you can begin trusting the AcuGraph knows what it's doing when it gives you point suggestions. I'm going to give you a little bit of information of what those points are and how they're chosen and how they work. And then my hope is that as you go in and you practice these, that you'll find the phenomenal, amazing experiences that I am experiencing. I really believe that, in all honesty, that we're just beginning to touch the surface of what we can do by adding this little box into our treatment. So having said that, we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the Divergent box. So first, let's talk about the history and development of the channel divergences, because I really didn't know a lot about them. I knew they existed, and they're part of all of the books where we teach about acupuncture channels and pathways, and I'm definitely fascinated in pathways, but I didn't know much more than that about them. So where did they come from? Really, the modern philosophy of the divergent channels, and all we know about them, or not all, most of what we know about them, started in the 1980s. And there are 4 key players in the field. And I'm not good with pronouncing all of these names, but we've got Eri, Seiki, Neomoto, and Mikishima. And Mikishima is the big player that that I will be focusing on later, but let's begin to look at them individually and see how they came into existence. So back in Japan, they were influential developers of the divergent channel systems. All of these gentlemen studied Japanese style acupuncture. So their theories, the things that they did in the clinic, were based on acupuncture channel theories and not TCM theories. But in reality, divergent channels are spoken of all the way back in the Neijing, but they were never expanded upon. There were people who were treating and using them, but the deep understanding of how they worked and where they went, those philosophies didn't come forward until later after deeper study. And it is these four guys who kind of brought it to the surface. So each had their own contribution to the expansion of the divergent channels. Eri, he began testing, and he used O-ring testing diagnostics. So you've seen where there's muscle testing with the O-ring type of diagnostics. That was the thing that Eri brought into it. And then he discovered the master divergent points. So there are points on each of these guys had a different combination of points that they were recognizing and how to put them together. But Eri discovered the specific points that are on the head. And that is kind of what has held in relation to Eri along the years. So let's see. Seiki, he would use pulse diagnostics so he didn't use O-rings, he used pulses to diagnose which channels needed to be used. He also introduced ion pumping cords. And ion pumping cords are different than electrical stimulation of an acupuncture channel. If you use an ion pumping cord, it's a single cord, and one end has a black clip and one end has a red. And so the basic theory that was understood that is, and there's something in the center called my mind is blank. Adrian will pop in here in a second.
A diode.
A diode. And the diode only allows the energy to move one direction in the cord. So if you were going to put the cord on an acupuncture point, one was black and one was red, one end would put energy in, one end would pull energy from an excess channel, and the other end would put energy into a channel from the other angle, from the other end of the wire. So that is the basic philosophy of ion pumping cords, and we'll get more into that later. But they realized that you could bypass the mess within the body of imbalances in the channel, and you could actually pull energy from a point on the channel and put energy into another. So instead of introducing energy to the channel, you actually are redistributing the body's own energy, so which fits really nicely into the Japanese style of gentle, balanced treatment. Then Neomoto, he added tuning forks into treatment. He used pulse, and he also added abdominal diagnostics. And he was a key player in adding auriculotherapy into the treatment. So he had a different combination of what he was doing. And then Mikishima, his contribution was that he began using the Akabani approach to diagnostics, which if you've taken any of our advanced or our classes in any of our CEUs that we've done with Dr. Larsen talks about the Akabani testing and how that progressed into a diagnostic test with AcuGraph, and it's figuring out which channels were excess and which channels were deficient. So Akabani diagnostics was with Mikishima, and then he added extraordinary channels into the divergent channels. So he would treat not just with divergence, but he would also treat with the extraordinaries. So the next generation after Mikishima, he obviously took what was good, or what he had recognized from these others. So the master divergent points, the ion pumping cords, and I believe he even added in auriculotherapy. I don't have that underlined, but then he added in the Akabani diagnostics and the ion pumping cord, and he developed his own system. So if you go back and you study the history of Mikishima, he first began studying or began his interest in acupuncture in 1967. In 1983 is when he began studying the divergent channels at a deeper level, or the divergent channels in general. 1985, he began teaching about the ion pumping cords and how he was using them. 1986, this was his only style of treatment. So he had moved on to all of the basic training that he had learned over the years, and he was convinced that treating with the divergent channels was the most effective in all of the experience that he had done over time. It was phenomenal. In 1990, he was part of the group of practitioners who lived in California. And because of the laws in California, he wasn't allowed to use the cords. He wasn't allowed to use magnets. He wasn't allowed to use any type of electrical anything. And so at that point, he reverted his treatment to the style of treating with silver and gold needles. And so again, a tonification and sedation technique, which was very specific to, similar to what you can do with the ion pumping cords. So the take-home message at this point right here is, as we discuss the divergent channel treatment further, recognize that over the years, there have been many forms of treatment. There have been many forms of diagnostics. And so that this is sort of where the silver and gold needles came in, and there have been magnets. And at this point in time, we're using lasers and ion pumping cords. So there's a lot of different things that have progressed in this generation. So we are part of this next generation from 1980 and beyond that has expanded the medicine. So, and it's modern. 1980s is when the real study of these divergent channels came into existence. And this is where we have writings of different people who've studied in different ways, and we're able to analyze and cross-analyze and put it all together. So then there's the next generation, Jake Fratkin. So Jake Fratkin studied with Mikishima back in the 80s, and he learned all about this divergent channel treatment. I remember sitting with Jake. when he was explaining all this to me. And he told me, he says, oh yeah, it was the coolest thing ever. And you would do this mathematical diagnostics, and there was all kinds of science behind why you would choose specific acupuncture points. And then you'd have to do the mathematics, and then you'd add the ion pumping cords, and you'd put everything together, and you'd get this great treatment. But then in Jake's word, he's like, yeah, cool theory, too much work. I'm not going to do the math on all of that in order to treat a patient. And so he moved on, and that was something that he had learned. And then he tucked it away in his knowledge base in the back of his head, and he moved forward to other treatment strategies. So still, we're in the next generation, how this treatment wound up in AcuGraph. So Jake Fratkin had been using AcuGraph for quite a while. And again, it was that little box that we didn't know anything about, and never went in there and looked at it. But before that time, there was Adrian Larsen. So Adrian Larsen develops AcuGraph, and he understood the value of taking the Akabani diagnostic test and putting it into a computer system, and have a computer help you recognize excess deficiencies, to tonify, sedate the luo points. And so he put all this into the system. So Adrian Larsen is the next guy who helps advance our medicine. And I remember asking Adrian about the little box and the divergences, and I'm sure I'm not telling the story as gracefully as it should, based on a lot of time. And I bet there'll be a time when Adrian talks about this more. But I said, well, so why do we have this divergent channel in here, and who created it, and is it any good, and what does it do? Well, Adrian had there was a gentleman that came to Adrian and said, hey, you really need to add these divergences in here, and here's how it works, and here's where it comes from. Introduced him to Mikishima and all of the information. And so Adrian put all of that into AcuGraph, and in order to make that guy happy, because the rest of us didn't even know how to use it or what to do with it. So it was in there, and it was just another cool function for those few people who knew or understand, or you could at least go, oh, cool, AcuGraph has divergent channels. Well, whatever that is. So we just ignored it, or me, I'll even just speak for myself. I ignored it because I didn't understand it. Then Jake finds it, and he calls Adrian up, and he's like, Adrian, do you know what you have in here? And Adrian gets really excited, and he begins using divergent channel treatments. And he taught a class, and I went to his class, and I got super excited. I knew that ion pumping cords existed. I knew that divergent channels existed. I didn't know what I could really do with them, but Jake got me excited. Things were changing in Jake's clinic. And so I came back and I started using them, and things began changing in mine. So that's a little bit of a background on how the divergent channels wound up in AcuGraph. So if you want to dig deeper, I got my little book here, the channel divergences. If you want to dig deeper on this stuff, and you want to learn, and you want to look at all of my tags here. There's so much to learn about divergent treatments. And in this book, Mikishima and Charles Chase, they take all of the different practitioners that were contributors along the way. They help you to understand the different philosophies, and then they focus on Mikishima's philosophies with 20 years of experience and where it went from there. So this webinar is an introduction to teach you why it's in AcuGraph, how it got there, and how to understand what you're looking at in AcuGraph. But this is my invitation to you to purchase this book and go deeper if that is what you're looking for. So I'm going to turn my face off now for a moment, and we're going to move forward and talk about the next levels here. Oh, you could also dig deeper with the technology symposium. Jake, as our guest speaker at that symposium, Divergent channels is what he talked about. And again, that is free for enterprise users. So when you can jump up to the enterprise plan at any point in time that you want to. And so that's not a problem. If you're only part of the professional plan, you can get that symposium through the enterprise user group. It's not going to be for sale individually. It is only offered for enterprise users. So let's talk about when you would use this style of treatment, because I still use other styles of treatment that I have used over the years. And so based on my newest analysis, ask me a year from now and I'll have a better answer, but because I will have progressed. But as of right now, this is my analysis. If you have a really messy graph and you don't even know where to begin, the Divergent channel is the perfect place to go. Deep viscera and bowel disorders. I can say that with quotes because that is what they talk about in the books. That is what they talk about in the classics. When you have really, to me, when you say deep viscera and bowel disorders, that's the tough stuff that you're trying to treat in your clinic. Autoimmune disorders, emotional disorders, the stuff that's just beyond the normal. I have a headache, or I have a shoulder pain, or can you help with my arthritis? This is the really deep stuff. So that is another reason to consider this treatment. Emotions, if you have a patient, I'll go down to my last note here, when nothing else works. Are you getting dizzy with me coming back and forth with my picture? I was getting to a point in my clinic where I felt like I was a really good practitioner and I was treating a lot of patients and getting really good results and getting a lot of referrals. But you know how sometimes you get those patients where you're doing everything that you know how to do, and their problem should resolve. It's pain in the hip. Why can't I resolve this pain in the hip? I know tendinomuscular points. I'm balancing the graph first. I'm working with chi and blood stagnation. I can add auriculotherapy. I'm doing everything that I know that would work for a patient, and they're just not getting better. This is when a Divergent channel treatment is phenomenal, because it goes deep and it makes an underlying interchange that you just wouldn't even be able to do with typical acupuncture treatment. And then when I add all of the other treatment protocols in, that's when those types of patients are getting better. Also, if you have really sensitive, depleted patients, so like my chemotherapy patients or extreme autoimmune disorder patients, those patients work really well with this type of treatment. So let's break it down. If you have opened a graph and you've treated your patient, all you need to do is you need to click on the little arrow. I'm curious, are you guys seeing my my mouse move over the screen? Somebody?
I'm not seeing it, no.
Okay. So I won't try to show you with my mouse. So click on the arrows, and then what you'll find is a bunch of points will come across the bottom of the screen. And the next step is to just click add these points into the treatment plan. Now you have a bunch of blue and red points, and some are left and some are right. And if you didn't know or understand that, you would think it was really confusing, and maybe you would just say, yeah, I'm not going to do that treatment plan, and you'd move on to something else. But I'm going to explain the differences of these points and how to think about them. So that's how you get to this treatment plan within your AcuGraph. So here is what you need to recognize. Within that whole bunch of points that are blue and red that will show up on your screen, what you see on the circled one, what you see there is a bunch of points, but there are actually 3 different sets of points that are listed there. And I have delineated those over to the right. So I've just highlighted them yellow, green, and light red just to show you the differences. That's not how they're going to show up in your AcuGraph, but this is to help you recognize when you're looking at points, what you're going to see. So there is a group of points that are extraordinary points. Those are the extraordinary vessel points that are showing up. The next group of points that are green are the divergent channel points, and the bottom ones are left right. You guys, do you know how excited I got when I found out? I was already experimenting, getting a little bit bored with my treatment strategies, and I was thinking, I just really want to treat extraordinary channels. And if I was looking at the graph, how would I choose which extraordinary vessel I might treat? And I was wanting to balance the graph using extraordinary channels. And funny how it was already in my mind and I was already playing around with it. And then when I sat with Jake and he showed me that the extraordinary points were right in AcuGraph, I just got so excited, just giggly with excitement. So I'm going to talk more about those, and you'll recognize that a couple of them you might be questioning me right now, but 2 of those aren't extraordinary points, because you see Stanjiao 5 and gallbladder 41, and then there's an LI 5 and a stomach 40. Don't worry, I'll explain that in a moment. So let's move on. The 3 modes of treatment give you a 3-dimensional treatment. The extraordinary channels help balance the upper body and the lower body. The divergent channels balance the yin and the yang, and the front and the back of the body. And then these points that are the left-right imbalances, which are the UB channels, notice they're all bladder points, they balance left and right. And each of these are based on certain strategies of treatment, which each of these strategies are all combined into this one treatment when you click on the box, okay? So just recognize there's 3 different strategies of treatment within them, and we're going to talk about each one. And of course, it's a beautiful treatment because it is the most 3-dimensional, all over everything treatment that you can get because of the combined effects. So I'm starting from the bottom and working up. And the reason that I'm starting from the bottom is because if you were going to choose different portions of your treatment that you wanted to use, the left-right imbalances, those are at the bottom. And if you were choosing not to use those, you could just click the red X's next to the left-right ones and pull all those points off. And then your treatment plan would be just extraordinary and divergent. So you can pull off different chunks of these if you choose to, after I explain all the differences between them. So the back ones, the back shoe points, they are to balance both sides of the body, left and right. It balances splits, but the thing you need to remember is your graph may not show any specific splits. You may not see any purples, but there will always be number variances between the 2. And so there is a mathematical equation on how AcuGraph comes up with those, but the split, the channels that have the biggest differences between left and right show up as point recommendations in AcuGraph, even if there aren't a ton of splits. So just because there are no purples in your graph, there will always be left-right point recommendations that show up in when you put all of these points on. So just recognize if you're using the back shoe points as part of your treatment strategy, what you're doing is you're balancing left and right. A good theory for using these would be if you had a lot of splits and that were real, not because you need practice graphing, but you had a lot of real splits, those points would be a good section of this treatment strategy to use. The next one is the divergent channels. And let's see, let me catch up to my notes here, some things I wanted to say. So divergent channels, let's just talk about them for a moment. They start very superficial on the body, then they go deep. They bypass all of the main channels in the body. They bypass the musculotendino, they bypass even the organs, and then they go all the way down to the viscera level. And then they submerge back up and they connect to the face. So there will always be a set of points that are on the face, head, or neck, and there will always be points that are on the limbs. So the divergent channels will connect yin-yang pairs. They will connect all of the organ systems to the face, and every divergent channel trajectory has a pathway that goes through the heart, which I think is interesting. A few notes that I pulled out of the Channel Divergent book that I thought were interesting. The divergent channels help to explain why certain acupuncture points work. Let's talk about bladder 57, for instance. It's the universal point for hemorrhoids, right? So bladder 57, the bladder channel doesn't go to the anus on an internal or an external level. Muscularly, I mean, the UB channel goes near the anus, but it doesn't have an exact pathway to the anus. The reason that bladder 57 works for hemorrhoids is because of the divergent, its divergent pathway goes right through the anus, and that's why that one works so well. And then there's lots of points on the head and the face that we don't understand why they work for different things. And the reason the points on the face work for things is because, again, something from the limb, there was a divergent point from the limb, then went internal into the body, and then winds up on the face. So that connection between the end of the divergent channel, the two ends of the divergent channel, connects the rest of the body to the face. So that's a basic understanding, and I'm claiming that it's very basic. If you read the book, you will find so much more. And I know that as I study more and get to understand more of what I'm doing, I'll be writing about this more and talking about it more. But it's fascinating to really get in and study the divergent channels. So at this point, AcuGraph makes an analysis and will say which divergent points to use. My next screen actually shows what all the divergent points are. So these are the points that would show up in that section. So the bottom was the bladder points. The next 4 points, there's always 4 points in the divergent. The next 4 points that show up will be one of the first, it'll be a combination of the limb and the face. And so it'll be a combination of points based off of this chart. So notice 2 of the divergent points on the face are bladder 1 and stomach 1. Who needles bladder 1 and stomach 1? You just don't. You don't put a needle in bladder 1 in the corner of the eye and stomach 1 right down underneath the eyeball. That wouldn't be a good day-to-day treatment. What I learned from Jake is that he uses bladder 2 and stomach 2 as alternative points. So AcuGraph will tell you bladder 1 and stomach 1 because we put the real points based off of the real divergent points. But the alternative point that you could substitute, that would be stomach 2 and bladder 2. And then I was also reading this morning that Mikishima says that bladder 1 could be substituted with bladder 11. And I don't have a lot more details on that. I'd like to read further, but that's another thought process that you can add to your notes. I suggest that you print off well, you have a handout, and in your handout, this divergent point list is in it. I suggest that you print that off so that when you're looking at your list of all of the blue and red points, you kind of are recognizing. So you know that the bottom ones are the left-right imbalances, and they're all UB points. The next chunk of points, which there will always be 4, comes from this list. And I think that is, for the most part, what you need to know and understand so that you can begin recognizing what shows up in your AcuGraph.
Hey, Kimberly,
Yeah.
I just posted the handout in case anybody doesn't have it already. It should show up there in your control screen where you can hit download file. And I'm not sure how it looks for the attendees. They may have to select a different icon from the chat icon.
Or you could not worry about it right now. And when we post this in the user group and we send you the recording afterwards, you will get the handout and it will be available to you. And so this message is also for those who will be watching the webinar later, who aren't watching it live. Your handout is in your account. When you look where the webinars are, the handout link will be there. And also we'll have the link for the blog posts that you should watch ahead of time. Okay, let's move on to the extraordinary channels. The extraordinary channels are the top set of points. The extraordinary channels balance musculoskeletal structure. There are reservoirs of energy beyond the main channels that if your main channels aren't functioning properly, the extraordinary channel is the next place to go to gather energy. They are great for psychological uses. And it's very important to recognize that Mikishima, when he analyzed the extraordinary channels, the 8 channels that, let's see, let me just, somewhere in my notes, here they are. So there are 8 extraordinary points. Well, there are 4 more, and those include points from the channels that are not used. So because there are 4 more that Mikishima has recognized are beneficial in AcuGraph, you will see some of the 8 plus 4 other points that could show up in there at any given time. There'll never be more than 4. Sometimes there are only 3, and we'll talk more about that later. But just so you know, those top points, there will either be 3 or 4, and they are all extraordinary points. And there are some points that you are not currently aware of. So here's a list of what those are. So the original 8 extras are listed as you've always known them. And here are the extras: the large intestine, the stomach, the liver, and the heart. And these are the points. I tried to analyze, looking at all the typical 8 extras and trying to see if there was some type of a common denominator between each of them. Like some of them are Luo points, and some of them are river points, and some of them are river and fire points. And then I looked at the new ones and tried to see if there was something common, and there really isn't. This came from 20 years of experience and Mikishima testing and recognizing, I guess, the same way that the original 8 extras were found. So this is a matter of trusting. And Jake would tell you that he muscle tests and goes, oh yeah, I'm supposed to use this point, I'm supposed to use this point, and he does them. I have other things that I do, and we all have ways that we're testing whether or not we trust a point. But at this point, I'm giving you enough information so that you can move forward and trust it yourself. Let's see. So here's how you treat. You now know how to find the points, and you know how to bring them all up. And this is what you would see. You would see a big list of points, and the basic treatment: if the point is colored red, you would tonify it. If the point is colored blue, you would sedate it. How do you want to tonify and sedate? If you have special needling skills where you tonify and sedate a specific way, you can do that. Based on the history of coming up with extraordinary channels, we have found that practitioners over the years have used different tools. One of them used tuning forks, and somebody else used magnets. And there's ion pumping cords. Mikishima moved on to gold and silver needles. At this point in time, I have had great experience using laser. So you could, if you were using laser, the ones that are red, you would treat with the red laser. The ones that are blue, you would treat with the blue laser. If you were using gold and silver needles, you would treat accordingly. The blue ones are to sedate, so you would use silver. The red are to tonify, so you would use gold. If you were using magnets to treat, you would treat based off of negative and positive polarities. And then if you're using ion pumping cords aren't red and blue on the two ends, they're red and black. If you put the red on the red needle and the black on the blue point, so red goes to the red point, black goes to the blue. So intermingle blue and black together if you were using ion pumping cords. There are combinations of which needles you would. The ion pumping cords is a little bit more advanced, and there's some thought process involved in that. We're not going to get in extreme detail on that in this webinar. Our next webinar, we're going to go into deep detail with ion pumping cords. I'll give you a little bit of information, but we'll talk about that more later. So let's practice. Here you are. If you were to grab your red and blue laser, treat what you see. Sanjiao 5, treat it with the blue laser. Gallbladder 41, treat it with the red. You really just need to graph the patient, put the information into your treatment plan, break things down into sections. The front of the body, if you're treating just a front treatment, I would needle the points on the front of the body on the left or right side. If I was just doing a front treatment, I would delete bladder 15, bladder 23, and bladder 11. I would delete all of those, the portion that's red, and I would just use the two, the yellow and the green portion. And if I was just doing the front of the body, so I'd be using the extraordinary treatment, and I would be using the divergent treatment. If you are using ion pumping cords just for basic, recognize that you have to break those into sections. So the first section is the extraordinary points. So Sanjiao 5 and gallbladder 41 go together. Large intestine 5 and stomach 40 go together. So I would use cord 1. I would put the black on Sanjiao 5 and the red on gallbladder 41. And I would continue, like I've told you, with cord 2. Cord 3 and 4 are connected to the divergent channel treatment. So pericardium 3 goes with gallbladder 12 and heart 3 goes with bladder 62. And we've explained how you would do those. The thing to recognize is the balance that needs to happen for this type of a treatment. It only takes 10 minutes for the body to balance. And so if you get those needles in, and get the clips on them, within 10 minutes, your root treatment is done. So what else am I doing? This is a root treatment. So if you go back to the original picture where, how are you going to balance your graph? Are you going to do a tonification, a basic treatment? Are you going to do a back shoe treatment? Are you going to do an ear treatment? Or are you going to do a divergent treatment? This is a balance the graph treatment. This is step 1, balancing the graph. I also do add points. If you come into me because you have knee pain and I'm choosing to do a divergent treatment, first, I'm putting the needles in for the divergent treatment. I'm hooking you up to the wires. And then while those wires are sitting, I'm moving to your knee and I'm doing whatever point specific treatment that I'm doing to break up stagnation in the knee. So just recognize that the divergent treatment is a root treatment and you can still do other things. Want to add auriculotherapy to take away shoulder pain? Want to add, after that 10 minutes, you want to turn them over and do a back treatment and still treat their neck and shoulders, you have many options. The fun part for me is the patient experience. Because this is new and I've had patients for years and years and years now, it's been fun for them because they're always watching, oh, what new thing are you doing now, Kimberly? And I'm like, oh, I've got this experiment. I'm trying this out, trying to see how it works with AcuGraph. So this is what I found. The graphs are definitely getting green faster. Whereas it used to take 6 treatments to get to the point where you have a green graph, then at this point, it's happening so much faster. Now, here's a disclaimer. Just because the graph is green, it does not mean that my patient's symptoms are all gone. It means that their body is in a place to where energy is running the way it's supposed to so that I can get in and work on that deep musculoskeletal problem or whatever their chief complaint is. Their body is in a position to where it will help me to help them better. People are falling asleep during treatment, and they're not just falling asleep, they're going into a deep sleep. It's just very, very relaxing. They feel movement. We have the discussion of a pinball game on a regular basis. You know, you pull the little ball and it goes up and it goes bing, 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 and then it moves and it falls into the cup in the end. Well, patients are recognizing when they're laying there. When I come back, I go, okay, so tell me what you felt. And they're like, oh, I felt a little something here. And then I felt a little something here. They are feeling major shifts during treatment, and it's kind of fun. They're intrigued. They're fascinated. And wellness patients, when I started incorporating this into wellness patients, that's when they come the next time and their graph looks fabulous. Let's see, in comparison to what their normal imbalances that they would come in with a month later, their graphs are looking better the next month than they have for years on a monthly basis. So I have given you enough to get started. I've given you enough to be excited, to trust what's in AcuGraph. I've given you some history. I've told you where you can go and learn more. And when I sat down to put all this, I got it all down, what I wanted to teach you. And I said to Adrian, I won't be able to keep this within an hour. I want everyone to look at their clock real quick. I kept this within an hour. And so I already have my outline for next month's webinar, but your input is going to be part of that webinar. So what you're going to get from me between now and my next webinar, I'm going to create some case studies. I'm going to give you some real life experiences of how I'm using this in my clinic and kind of show you what's going on and give you the day-to-day. We're going to get into in-depth theories and strategies for ion pumping cords. You will have questions. Those people who have taken the little bit of excitement that I've shared about the Divergent channel and ion pumping cords, they're going out there and using it. And then they're texting me or sending me emails and, Kimberly, what would you do about this? And what would you do about that? My friend Robin Green, I'm pretty sure she's sitting in here. Robin and I talk on a regular basis, and we were chatting one day and I said, hey, Robin, guess what I'm doing? And she's like, tell me more about this, Kimberly. So I started telling her, and I gave her just enough information. And before you know it, she was texting me. She's like, Kimberly, I can't even believe how amazing this is and how it works. So that was just with a phone conversation. I'm hoping with what I've given you today that I've given you a lot of excitement and confidence to go out there and try it. But then I want to hear back from you. My email is right here. Send me emails. You can send me questions. I may not answer all of them in a big detailed email to get back to you, but I will take your question. I'll respond to you and I'll take your questions. And my next webinar will be filled with your questions. And so I'm going to do frequently asked questions, and I'm going to talk about some of the branch treatments that I'm doing, because to be clear, my graphs are getting greener faster. The Divergent channel is one element of that, plus other things that I'm doing. So I want to hear from you what's happening. I want to hear about your patient experience. I want to hear your questions, and you can count on the next webinar coming soon. I think I am done. We must have questions.
We should look at questions you've got.
Okay, I'm going to have a drink of water. Throw the questions at me.
All right, you want me to read you some?
Actually, I see here. So James says, do you know of a way to use ion pumping cords without needles? You know, the first time I went and learned from Jake, he was using needles in the face and he was taping them down and he was clipping on them and he gave me all kinds of information. The next time that I learned from Jake, he's like, yeah, sometimes I just tape the ion pumping cord on the face in the right place. And so he's actually just using the ion pumping cord. I think there's a lot of creativity here. There's lots of expansion to figure out. I have some theories and thoughts, but I'll save more of that to the next ion pumping cord portion in our next webinar. Robin says also, are the pairs always listed in order when you get the list of points? Are the pairs always listed in order when you get the list of points? So I did break down the different sections. So yes, like your two, Sanjiao 5 and gallbladder 4. Let me go back to that screen. It'll just take me a second here. So here, Sanjiao 5 and gallbladder 41 were listed next to each other. LI 5 and stomach 40 were listed next to each other. Pericardium 3 and gallbladder 12, they go together. Heart 3 and bladder 2, they go together. So I hope that's enough to answer that question. There are a few, sometimes, and we will talk about this in the next webinar, sometimes in the extraordinary channel section, there aren't 4, there are only 3. In your handout, I've explained that, kind of put that in detail, but we haven't talked about it in a webinar yet, and we will next time. So please read your handout for more on that. Robin also asked about the book. It's called The Channel Divergences by Mikishima. And that is the book where I'm reading for more detailed information. Am I missing any questions, Adrian?
No, I think you got them all. Oh, wait, Heidi asked, why treat bladder 11 on the left only? I already explained that that was actually coming in as a different purpose. It was a substitute for the bladder 1 that you said Mikishima identified and used. And so it was not there as a left-right balance thing, but it ended up down in that list on your picture. Right.
Okay, I see. My other disclaimer on this webinar, typically we're like 1 month out to the next webinar. I have a grandbaby that is going to be born in October. So I will be in Baltimore, and that grandbaby has to stay inside her mommy until I get back. And then I've got a baby coming. So we may push this one out just a little bit, maybe early November. We'll try to find a date that works for everyone on our end, but I get to be a grandma. So
again, that's awesome. Well, Kimberly, thank you. Excellent job. Looking, I don't see any other questions coming in. Did I miss anything? Oh, Heidi says, Adrian, you're bringing ion pumping cords to Amsterdam. Yeah, I will. Also, why some back shoe points are only unilateral in the treatment plan. We covered that one. Robin says, congrats. So cool. Thanks, everybody. Hope you got a lot out of this. This is really exciting stuff. Kimberly talks about the shifts the patients are seeing, not only on their graph, but having these weird, delightful out-of-body experiences and deep relaxation and feeling changes in their body as a result of this treatment going on for days. So this is very exciting stuff. I hope you'll try this out. And Kimberly, we're going to be excited for part 2 when you start demoing this and showing us exactly how you're treating, right?
That's right. We got more to come.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a great month. Bye-bye.
Bye.